So we're going to go ahead and get started with making our enemy characters. And in this first video, we got to start from square one, and that's basically getting our enemy sprites and animations set up within Unity. So what we're going to be doing in this video is importing and sorting through our enemy sprites and using Gambit's animation controller as a starting point so we can save a lot of time in setting up a brand new animation controller for our enemy here. So I'm still working in my new scene here, or my old scene with the Gambit character controller set up. But I'm going to go ahead and start by making a new scene. And I'm just going to save as, keep the scene we're working in here, and go to prototype. I'm going to call this enemy setup, I guess. Enemy setup. And we're going to keep Gambit in the scene so we can have something to test our AI with. But I'm just going to go ahead and pull him back to not the middle of the screen here. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and save this new scene. We're in our new enemy setup scene, and we're keeping Gambit in our scene. And now we need to go through and determine what sprites we're going to use for our enemy. And I've selected the age-old Sentinel of the X-Men universe, the perfect beat-em-up fodder. It's just a mutant hunting robot. I don't know if you're familiar with the X-Men universe, but we have plenty of sprites that we can use to set up a nice enemy with our Sentinel. I've already sorted out all my animations. Again, if you're coming into this late, here's a link that will redirect you to the first few videos of how we set up the animations for our player character. So you may want to check those out before you go any further to see how I'm skipping through some of these steps. But as you can see, I have a whole Sentinel folder with all my attacks sorted. Attack 1, 2, 3. And basically, I'm just kind of trying to find the same kind of animation states that Gambit had. Just a walk state, taking damage or being hurt, idle, fall, block, and 3 different attacks. So just kind of mimic what you were doing with your player character uh, as far as sorting through the sprites and organizing them in that fashion. So now, since I have all my sprites sorted out, I'm going to go ahead and import them into Unity, and let's see how we can do that. I'm going to go to my sprites folder, and you'll notice I don't really have a good organization set up. I have sprites, and I immediately have attack 2, 3, and all that stuff. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a new folder, and we're going to call this Gambit, because we need to be able to tell the difference between the Sentinel animation sprites and Gambit sprites. So Unity does a good job of figuring out where you're moving things as long as you organize inside your project window. So we shouldn't be breaking anything. And I'm going to make a new folder called Sentinel. And in my new folder called Sentinel, I'm going to start making folders that match the folders I have set up here. So I know I'm going to have a few folders. So I'm going to make one folder, Control D a few times to duplicate. Now I can just go in and start renaming. There's idle. I know I'll need an idle. Actually, if you double click, it takes you out. So a single click should allow you to rename. Attack 1, attack 2, attack 3, just like we did for Gambit here. And hurt, so when we get hit, he'll have a hurt animation and a fall down. I think I need 2 more for block, and I'm going to go ahead and put in block and projectile. I don't know if I'll utilize them in these tutorials. I think I'm just going to make a really basic AI, but it never hurts to have those assets ready if you want to take your enemy AI further. But for all intents and purposes, what I'm going to focus on are idles, walks, falls and hurts, and the attacks. The block and the projectile will be something that you might be able to add on your own later if you get really like this AI stuff we're going to be getting into. So with my folder set up, I'm going to click on attack 1, and I'm going to go to attack 1 in my Windows Explorer. And the easiest way I've found is just to click and drag from your Windows folder straight into your project folder inside of Unity. And I'm just going to do that for all of these guys here. Unity does a pretty easy job for you of importing assets in this manner. There's my block. So I'm just switching between the windows, selecting what folder in my project window here in Unity, and then navigate into the corresponding folder inside of my operating system. And just dragging and dropping. There's the hurt folder. I think I called it take damage over here. So be careful with your naming conventions. It can make it a little bit more confusing. And our idle folder. The idle for the Sentinel is really simple. It's only 2 frames. And then there's projectile. So I'm just dragging and dropping them in. This is just an importation process. And here's my walk cycle. All right. So after we have all of our sprites imported, we need to do a few things to all of our sprites per folder. I'm going to go ahead and select all of my sprites here. And I need to go into my inspector, and I need to tweak the values like we did for our Gambit. First, and make sure you have all of your sprites selected in each folder. Control A is a shortcut. If you're inside that folder and you're just clicking an empty space, you can hit Control A to select it all. We're going to change our textures type to Sprite 2D and UI, and we're going to give it a packing tag of Sentinel. And we're going to be typing in Sentinel a lot, so I'm going to highlight that word and copy it so I can paste it in all the other Sprite frames we have going on. And then we're just going to hit apply. And we're going to do that over and over again for each attack animation string we have going on. And I'm just quickly going through this so I don't bore you guys to tears. And it's going to be really easy to set up our enemy animation controller, because we'll just copy or duplicate gambits, and then we'll just swap in new animations we're going to make here in a second. So you don't have to go through the hassle of creating a whole new cobweb or spider web of connections and everything. All of our logic is going to be defined for us. We just need to switch in our animations, and then we're going to call those animations differently based on UI methods of programming. All right, so I think I about got them all. All right, it's great. So now we're going to, excuse me, we're just going to double check and make sure that our Sprite Packer in window is set up. And if we select Gambit, page 1, we're going to hit Pack. And what this is doing is it's packing our Gambit and our Sentinel. That Sentinel tag we kept copying and pasting allowed Unity to go ahead and make a single sprite atlas. And what this basically does, I've probably explained it before, I'll do it again though, is instead of Unity reading each and every single frame we just imported in, it makes a atlas or a collection of all the sprites on one texture sheet, and it's actually rendering these images, but it just picks out what place in the whole texture or sprite sheet it actually renders. So it's a little bit weird, but for the walk cycles, it goes boom, 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 boom as it's rendering. And they're all mix and match because Unity has it all under control. So that's the Sprite Packer. It's really a nice little tool that helps optimize your game. All right, the next thing we have to do is, well, let's go ahead and get our Sentinel into the scene here. So to do that, I'm going to select Sentinel, and I'm going to go to Idle. And I'm just going to drag and drop Sentinel 39 right into our scene. I'm going to position him. All right, I'm going to make sure his foot's not clipping into the ground here. That looks about right. And yeah, his back foot will kind of look like it's floating in the air, but from the perspective that we'll be watching the game, it probably won't. It'll look like his foot's on the ground for the most part. All right, so why don't we go ahead and rename the sprite we just put into our game scene Sentinel. And now we have something comparable to our Gambit prefab over there. But we're missing a few things. We're missing a box collider, and we're missing a rigid body. So why don't we go ahead and, for now, let's just focus on putting a box collider on the sprite. So we'll go to Physics, Box Collider, and we're going to have to rearrange it. I'm going to get rid of this ground. It's making that green box hard to see, and this directional light's in the way, so I'm just going to pull it up. So there's our box collider. I'm going to hit my Edit Collider button here and grab these little green squares that appeared just to get an approximation of about where our Sentinel dimensions are. And then I'm going to zoom in and really hone in on this. I'm going to go to 2D mode and just make sure that we're set up good here. Basically, what we're making is our box that controls the character's collision to the ground here. So that's our Gambit box collider we have going on right there. And all it's in charge of doing is just making sure that we're not falling through the floor here. So not a trigger. And why don't we just make this a little bit wide just for the sake of having a wide box here. This is not the box we'll be using for hit detection. This is simply the box we'll be using to compute some of the physics calculations with making sure our character doesn't fall through the floor of our levels. All right, so our box collider's set up. That's great. What does our Gambit have that our Sentinel doesn't have now? Our Rigidbody. Why don't we hold off on that until we absolutely need a Rigidbody to start driving the motion of our character? So whenever we get into moving our enemy, we'll make sure we have the right kind of component. More than likely it'll be a Rigidbody, but let's just hold off on that until we're absolutely sure. And it looks like Gambit has a whole controller script. That'll be something that we create in the coming videos. But you'll see that Gambit does have an animator component right here, and our Sentinel does not. So what we're going to do is we're going to give our Sentinel a whole set of animations and an animation controller. For right now, why don't we go ahead to our animations folder, and we're going to create a folder just for our Sentinel. And like Gambit had all of his animations, we're going to do the same for our Sentinel here. If I go to my animation window, we'll see that it's grayed out. We don't have any animations for our Sentinel here. So I'm going to go ahead and click Create. I'm going to make sure I'm in my animations window. I'm going to make sure we're in our Sentinel window, and we're going to create our first idle animation. And to make our idle animation really pop, why don't we go to our Sprites window down here and select idle. And then we're just going to select all of our idle frames and just drag and drop it into our animation timeline we have up there. You can get to that by going to window and animation. That's the window we're working in right now. So I got my 2 frames in there. But you'll see that my Sentinel is like freaking out. It looks like he's tweaking on something. So why don't we go to our samples and slow that way down to maybe 5 samples. And that's still a little too fast for a giant robot, I think. So why don't we go down to 2 samples? There we go. Just really calm and collected kind of robot. Just, I don't know, I might go back up to 3. And boom, we have our idle animation set up for our Sentinel. Now we're going to do that for the rest of our sprites. We have our sprite folders down here. So to create another animation, we're going to go to this little drop-down window, create new animation. Make sure we're in the right folder. Animations, Sentinel. There's our idle one we had. So let's do walk. And we're going to go to walk. Control A to select all of our walk frames. Import it in. Adjust our samples maybe down to something 10. Hit play to check it out. And we now have our Sentinel walking. All right. And then we're just going to keep on trucking. Just making a attack 1. Go to attack 1 folder of our Sentinels. And don't confuse your Gambit sprites with your Sentinel sprites. Make sure you're still working in your Gambit folders here. There's our attack 1. Create a new clip. Attack 2. Select all these little guys. Lower down our samples to about 15. We got a kick going. Create a new clip. Attack 3. Again, drag and drop our frames into our timeline up here. And then we'll go set down to 15 samples. Now we have a big robot haymaker. That will be his final attack. I mean, that's a rocket punch. You can't mess with a rocket punch. And for the sake of the rest of them, let's just work through them. So we have a hurt animation, really quick for the Sentinel. I like to preview each animation just to make sure I've imported them correctly and set the samples correctly. And then fall animation, Control A, drag and drop, set the samples to 10 or 15. That's a little slow to me, so I'm going to set my samples up to 15. There we go. It's a little bit faster. Great. And now why don't we just finish it out by making our block and animation. I'm just going to go ahead and get these set up. And if I need to incorporate them into the game, the animations will be really set up for me. So that's my block. He has a fan on his arm, because everybody knows a fan is the best defense. And then projectile. I want to go ahead and get his projectile animation working. And he spits a loogie at us as his projectile. Sentinels are known for their spitting habits. They're the camels of the robotic world. All right. So I think we have all of our animations set up really nicely. What is this? I don't know what that is. If I delete it, I wonder if it'll do anything. That looks like we're good. So now that we have our animation set up, we actually have to give our Sentinel an animation controller. Remember this guy we made in our last video here? Yeah, we're going to have to do something like that for our Sentinel. So the easiest thing we're going to do is just select our animation controller for Gambit, hit Control D, and then we're just going to rename it to Sentinel animation controller. Get that one off of there. And then we're going to just drag and drop it onto our Sentinel up there. Now our Sentinel has his very own animation controller, and we didn't have to set up any of these things. We're using the same logic as we did when we made our Gambit video, or our Ambit controller. So everything should be perfect, right? Let's go ahead and get our ground in, and let's hit play. Well, what the heck? We have two Gambits now. That's to be expected because we haven't gone into our Sentinel animation controller and swapped out our motion or our animations that we just got through making. So we're going to go through each one, and we're just going to drag and drop these new animations on there. So I went to my Sentinel animations folder. I went to idle, and I made sure I'm making sure I'm in my Sentinel game object. I'm selecting idle. You can see I have an idle right there. I'm in my Sentinel animations. We're making sure we're dragging our Sentinel animation idle onto the Sentinel animator idle node, and it brings up this inspector. We drop it onto motion. We hit play, and now we have our Sentinel. Just I'll maximize. You can see a little bit easier. And now we have our Sentinel and idle. So what we need to do now is we need to do that for every single node in our web here. So I'm going to select my walk node, and I'm already in my animations Sentinel folder. So I'm going to drop my Sentinel animation walk there, attack 1, and here it's just clockwork. We're selecting our node, dragging and dropping the right animation on there, and we're just updating this guy here so everything is gravy. There's our hurt, drop hurt on there. Here's our fall. We'll drop fall on there. And is that projectile? We'll do that too. All right. So everything should be good. We should be set up with our new enemy AI here. We have our Sentinel. So in the coming lessons, we're going to tackle driving our animations through AI logic. We're going to be talking about nav meshes and navigation for our Sentinel here. And of course, we're going to be getting into the scripts that drive all of his behavior. So our Sentinel is set up, and now we're ready to start diving in further into creating some simple but, game-worthy AI where we can make a simple little beat 'em up. All right, stay tuned to the next few videos, guys.